Things are escalating with the tensions between the United States and Russia as we are hearing the warnings in roughly the last 48 hours of potential World War III with these two nuclear powers. Let's go ahead and take a look at the latest headlines so that way you can see it for yourself. You can see here Trump appears to set Putin 2-week deadline on Ukraine. You can see this coming out in the last 24 hours, giving Putin an ultimatum. In the next 14 days, you need to put a stop to this war or else. And this comes as I just shared with you in the last 48 hours as well. Former Russian president threatens Trump with World War III after Putin criticisms. This made headlines left and right. I shared with you a ton of them coming out as we're hearing things are escalating with tensions between the U.S. and Russia. Now, let me know your thoughts. Do you think that this threat from Donald Trump against Vladimir Putin and Russia is going to work? Do you think that there is going to be a ceasefire agreement in the next 14 days? If you think so, put yes. If you think no, put no. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And while you're doing that also, don't forget to take a quick second, hit the like button, help spread this out further if you appreciate the latest updates. I'm going to share with you video footage coming out today, May 29th, 2025, so that way you can see it for yourself, hear the warnings, hear the threats, the war of words they're calling it, that is taking place between the United States and Russia, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. I'm going to put it on the screen. These are going to be hyperlinked in the description. I'm going to share with you the latest, and if you appreciate that, like I said, do me a quick favor, hit that like button. That simple gesture helps out the channel a ton, and to stay up to date, it's totally free. Why not go ahead and hit that subscribe button, turn on that notification bell. I'm going to be keeping you up to speed on everything that's going on with the war with Russia and Ukraine, the conflict in the Middle East. We're hearing that right now. Israel and the United States are butting heads a little bit. Netanyahu and Trump, as Trump is telling them, do not strike those nuclear facilities yet. We're trying to work on a deal with Iran. We're going to be seeing what happens with the Middle East. And in addition to that, we still have China, North Korea, a lot of conflicts taking place all over the world. And we're still seeing here in the United States, Congress working on that big, beautiful bill to pass legislation that will help out our economy, help out those on Social Security, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, seeing what can be done. And also a lot of people vocalizing their disappointment with that big, beautiful bill, as we had heard Elon Musk say that as well, saying this is not going to be going the direction that we had originally thought. And a lot of people disappointed that there was no Doge dividend stimulus refund checks. Let me know. Were you hoping to see those Doge checks? If so, drop a Doge in the comments. But right now, we're seeing it as not in the bill. We're going to see if anything changes as the Senate is working away. But regardless, I will be sure to keep you up to speed on all of this here on the channel. So if you're not subscribed yet, be sure to do so. I'm going to make sure that you are aware of everything that is taking place and that might be impacting you and your family. Now, in addition to that, with all of the conflict that's taking place, something very important I wanted to share with you guys, and that is if you or somebody you love is in debt. Now, debt doesn't just show up one day. It builds little by little. Credit cards, car loans, medical bills, and suddenly you're juggling payments, feeling stuck. But here's the good news. You're not stuck. You just need a reset. And that is why today I'm excited to share with you American Financing. They help homeowners like you every day. They use your home equity and roll that high interest debt into one simple, affordable payment. They're saving homeowners an average of $800 a month. No judgment, no pressure, just real solutions that put you back into control. So if you're facing financial hardship, you might want to give them a call. Imagine breathing again, sleeping again, knowing your future is yours to shape. It starts with one simple call that only takes about 10 minutes to get started, and there are no upfront fees, so it costs nothing for you to find out how much you can save. So if that is you, you might as well give them a call. It's totally free. And if you start today, you may be able to delay your next 2 months' mortgage payments. That could be a huge savings of thousands of dollars. American Financing's salary-based consultants are ready to listen and ready to help. Take back your peace of mind with American Financing. So call American Financing today at 866-890-7706. That's 866-890-7706. AmericanFinancing.net/Steve Ram. You can see it on the screen. I've also got the QR code for you, and also I'm going to have this pinned in the comments down below for you. So thanks again to American Financing making that available. Like I said, it's free to give them a call, see if they can help you out. They save on average $800 a month, the people that they're able to help out. And you can see if that will work out for you. So thank you for that. But now let's go ahead and dive into the video footage so you can see it for yourself. What is going on with the conflicts between the United States, Russia, potential World War III. Let's go ahead and take a look at this video footage.
Right now, I do want to take a live look over Washington, D.C. and the White House as the war of words does continue between Presidents Trump and Putin, as well as other U.S. and Russian officials. President Trump appearing to give the Russian president 2 weeks to work out a deal to end the 3-year war with Ukraine. Trump recently calling Putin crazy and saying that he's playing with fire. Now, speaking from the White House Wednesday, Trump was asked about his fractured relationship with Putin, and here is what he had to say.
When they say that your criticisms of Putin are simply an emotional response, and do you still believe that Putin actually wants to end the war?
I can't tell you that, but I'll let you know in about 2 weeks. Within 2 weeks, we're going to find out very soon. We're going to find out whether or not he's tapping us along or not. And if he is, we'll respond a little bit differently, but it'll take about a week and a half, 2 weeks. We have Mr. Witkoff is here, is doing a phenomenal job, is dealing with them very strongly right now. They seem to want to do something, but until the document is signed, I can't tell you. Nobody can. I can say this. That I'm very disappointed at what happened a couple of nights now, where people were killed in the middle of what you would call a negotiation. I'm very disappointed by that.
For over 50 years, the timeless classics of John Williams
And this right here is just some of the video of what the president is talking about there. Ukrainian officials saying that Russia launched its largest drone attack on Ukraine over the weekend. The Russian bombardment Sunday night included at least 355 drones. That is according to the Ukrainian Air Force. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky adding that more than 900 drones were fired at his country over a 3-day period. Now, it's also important to note that after President Trump made those comments, we also heard from the former Russian president, Dmitry Medvedev, who is now a top Russian security official. He threatened the U.S., stating this could lead to World War III. A lot to discuss here, so I do want to bring in Dimitris Sarahas, a Virginia Tech foreign relations expert, visiting professor of political science, a lot of titles there. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us this morning.
Good morning, Josh. Thank you for having me.
Good morning. Well, first off, I do want to start by asking you about those World War III comments that were made by the former president of Russia. He is now a top security official there in Moscow. So how much weight do those words really hold? Because you hear World War III, and that's obviously a threat to the U.S.
It's another one of the series of threats that Medvedev has sort of expressed over the last 3 years. Remember, at the beginning of the war, a similar rhetoric was coming from the Kremlin. Of course, Medvedev being the former Russian president, who became president when Putin switched over to become prime minister for a short while. So I don't think that this is particularly surprising, but it just denotes a change of tone on the part of how Moscow now sees Washington. They had stopped making these threats for a while, and of course there was a window of opportunity, particularly in the early days of the Trump administration, when the idea that Russia may be persuaded to change its ways appeared to be more viable. However, these threats seem to suggest that the talks that the president referred just there on your clip are not going the way that is envisaged. And of course, European unity behind Ukraine and additional US pressure now is making things a lot more difficult for the Kremlin. And I think this is one of the reasons why they feel the need to justify their actions by using a rhetoric that is obviously menacing and attempting to threaten or even blackmail the United States.
As we talk a little bit about these comments that have been made kind of back and forth between the U.S. and Russia, how has the relationship between President Trump here in the U.S. as well as President Putin over in Russia kind of changed over the last several days and really over the last several weeks?
You're right. It has changed, and it has changed quite dramatically. Remember that in the period before the election here in the United States in November, there were these sounds coming from the Kremlin about how future President Trump would be potentially a partner of Russia, and how a change in leadership in Washington would sort of facilitate the kind of resolution to the war that the Russians were claiming was very important to them. Now, I think what we have been able to observe is that President Trump himself has shifted his rhetoric over Putin. I think there was an idea or an assumption in the early days of the administration that coming to a resolution and starting off with a ceasefire that would then become a permanent sort of peace settlement would be pretty straightforward. And of course, we recall that in the early days, relations between President Trump and President Zelensky of Ukraine were characterized by a degree of tension, precisely because President Trump believed that he's the one who will make sure that a deal is made with Putin. Now, I think what has changed is the United States has come to realize that Putin is not necessarily interested in finishing this war, which remains the ultimate objective of the White House. And so the first 30-day ceasefire idea was undermined by the Russians. And I think what we have now is again an attempt to undermine the possibility of a lasting peace.
What are we talking about as far as red lines, things that both sides are not going to budge on? Of course, we're talking about Ukraine, we're talking about Russia. What are their red lines, so to speak?
I think it's quite clear that for the Ukrainians, if they stop fighting, and if they stop fighting particularly on the border with Russia, they have no country any longer. So for them, I think the idea is simply that you have to keep on fighting for as long as the United States and Europe stands behind you if you want to have any sort of viable exit strategy from this war, and of course rely on your partners in the West to negotiate with Putin, or themselves to negotiate directly with Putin. There is a possibility of doing this in Istanbul, Turkey, coming up next week, in order to resolve this. For the Russians, it's quite clear that they do have the red lines, Josh, that you referred to right here. And they have to do, of course, with Ukraine's NATO accession first and foremost. Secondly, they have to do with the annexation of Crimea. I don't think Russia is willing to give back Crimea to the Ukrainian state. And it seems to me that this is something that President Trump himself has sort of tacitly acknowledged to be probably a line that the Russians will not cross. I think the real question is what happens on eastern Ukraine, how much of the territory which is currently under Russian occupation will be returned to the Ukrainians or not. I think this is really going to be a subject of a long-term peace settlement. And at the moment, all we have in front of us, once again, is probably the possibility of a fragile ceasefire.
Hi, I'm Adam, and I made an appointment with Lifeline Screening to get my arteries examined for...
And as we move forward, and you kind of touched on this here, where do things go from here? What is the next step in all of this as we wait for the next move? Of course, we're waiting to see if there will be any more ceasefire talks. We know that President Trump has given Putin essentially 2 weeks to make this happen. So what do we see happening here in the coming days and weeks?
I think that's a very good question. It's really up to American pressure, I think. If you look at what's happening on the battlefield, it's quite clear that none of the two sides is going to lose this comprehensively over the next 2 weeks. Everyone knows this. And of course, the Russians are not going to lose this. The Ukrainians are still able to resist, not least because the United States and, of course, the European Union countries and countries like Britain continue to support them militarily. So I don't think there's going to be anything happening on the military front. What may happen is in the diplomatic front that President Trump alluded to in the clip you played before. And essentially what this means is I think the United States is going to up the ante. The United States is going to put more pressure on Russia to come to the table with a serious proposal about a lasting ceasefire to start with, verify that there is going to be some mechanism that will allow for this ceasefire to last, as opposed to the previous ceasefire that collapsed almost immediately, and try really to make sure that the Russians are truthful to what they say. And if the United States and President Trump are convinced that Putin is serious about a ceasefire, then I think we can have more long-term discussions to finally lead to a lasting peace settlement, which, of course, would be in the interests of everyone involved.
And I do want to ask folks out there watching right now, we want to get their take. So you can scan the QR code here at the top right-hand side of your screen. These votes are coming in real time. But do you support the current level of U.S. involvement in the Russia-Ukraine conflict? The options there, yes, it's appropriate. No, the U.S. should do more. And no, the U.S. should do less. Again, we want to get your take, so scan that QR code, top right-hand side of your screen, or go to livenowfox.com/connect. We'll check on the results as they do come in real time. Right now, it looks like essentially the U.S. should do more is winning. But again, these votes are coming in, so it's kind of changing here on your screen as we get the results. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us here and discuss all of this further. Obviously, a lot to this, so we appreciate it. Anything else you want to add here before I let you go?
Thank you for having me, Josh. Just a very small thing to add here, looking at the poll you're running right now. It's good to remember that whether we believe that the U.S. should do more or less in this war, it's very important to keep in mind that after January 2025, speaking about a lasting peace has become again an issue that everyone, including Europe and Ukraine, is now thinking about and is now trying to bring to the table. And I think that ultimately arriving at a peace settlement is in everyone's interest.
All right. Thank you again for taking the time to join us. We appreciate it.
There you have it, you guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Now, after hearing that, do you think, is there going to be a peace agreement in the next 14 days, in the next 2 weeks? This is what Donald Trump said today, May 29th, 2025. Actually, in the last 24 hours, it might have been yesterday evening, but in the last 24 hours, we are hearing that Donald Trump is saying, you've got 2 weeks to come to a ceasefire agreement, Russia and Ukraine. You need to have a ceasefire, and if you do not, well, we're going to be seeing where we're going from here. But in the last 48 hours, we've heard Russia giving direct warnings to the United States, saying that you potentially could be pushing World War III here, Donald Trump. Take a look. You can see here, this coming out, you can see yesterday, May 28th, former Russian president threatened Trump with World War III after Putin criticisms. Donald Trump said that Putin was crazy, it was reckless, that he was playing with fire. Well, Russia did not like that, and we saw the response coming out. And I'm seeing no's pouring into the comments. People are saying no, they don't think that there is going to be a ceasefire deal in the next 2 weeks. Now, we will see. Does that mean that we're going to be going into World War III? If you think so, drop a 3 in the comments. If you think no, put a 4. Let me know your thoughts. And I've heard some people say we're already in World War III right now. But let's take a look at this article as we're hearing that there is a 2-week deadline, an ultimatum by Donald Trump on Russian President Vladimir Putin to put an end to the war in Ukraine. You can see here this coming out from BBC News. And this article says that U.S. President Donald Trump has appeared to set a 2-week deadline for Vladimir Putin, threatening a different response if the Russian counterpart was still stringing him along. And we've heard a lot of people say this, that they believe that Putin is just kind of stringing him along with some of the other adversary nations as well, just seeing if they can outlast Trump over the course of the next 4 years. And then after that, they can just continue on with what it was that they were doing. As the Kremlin escalates its attacks on Ukraine, Trump was asked in the Oval Office on Wednesday if he thought Putin wanted to end the war. I can tell you that, but I'll let you know in about 2 weeks, Trump told reporters. Or excuse me, he said, I can't tell you that, but I'll let you know in about 2 weeks. Now, the latest amid a string of critical public remarks made by Trump about Putin. Now, since Sunday, Trump has written multiple posts on social media saying that Putin has gone absolutely crazy and is playing with fire after Russia intensified its attacks on Ukraine. Now, the bombardment of Russia by Russia, they are said to have been some of the largest and deadliest attacks since the start of the war. Now in its 4th year. So just to clarify, from the time that this started back in 2022, and now we're here in 2025, things have intensified in the last 3-4 days, the likes of which we have not seen before. Russian strikes in Kiev, Ukraine's capital, ended the lives of 13 people and injured dozens more, including children, over the weekend. And by Wednesday, the attacks had shown no signs of slowing down. In Trump's remarks about the escalation of the violence and whether he thinks Putin is serious about ending this war, Trump said, "I'll let you know in about 2 weeks. Within 2 weeks, we're going to find out whether or not Putin is tapping us along or not. And if he is, we'll respond a little bit differently here." Now, the comments are a sign of Trump's growing frustration as the White House's repeated efforts to negotiate a deal between Russia and Ukraine appear ever more futile. This includes a recent 2-hour phone call between Trump and Putin, after which the U.S. president said the discussions went very well. Putin walked away from the call saying that he was ready to work with Ukraine on a memorandum on a possible future peace agreement. That call was 1 week before Russia launched hundreds of drones and dozens of missiles towards Ukraine's capital, according to the Ukrainian Air Force. And a memorandum has yet to be produced by Russia. Now, so far, Trump's threats, they have not appeared to concern Moscow sufficiently for it to accede to his demands. Trump has not delivered on previous such threats. Now, since taking office, Trump has only taken action against Ukraine as Washington sought to steer the countries to Trump's demand for a truce. Now, this included an 8-day suspension of U.S. military assistance and intelligence sharing with Kiev in March. Meanwhile, the U.S. administration has not publicly demanded any significant concessions yet from Russia. The White House rejects accusations of appeasing Moscow or failing to enforce its will, pointing out that all the Biden-era sanctions remain in force against Russia. But so far, its mediation approach appears to have made the Kremlin more, not less, empowered. Now, after the latest attacks, Trump wrote on Truth Social that something has to happen to Putin, which the Kremlin said were comments that connected to an emotional overload. Russia's attacks on Ukraine continue in the days afterwards. Trump then escalated his criticisms. On Tuesday, he said that Putin was, quote, playing with fire, and that lots of bad things would happen to Russia if it were not for Trump's involvement. A Kremlin aide responded to the latest Trump Truth Social post by saying, "We have come to the conclusion that Trump is not sufficiently informed about what is really happening." Putin aide Yuri Ushkava told Russian state TV channel Russia 1 that Trump must be unaware of the increasingly frequent massive terrorist attacks that Ukraine is carrying out against peaceful Russian cities. On Wednesday, Germany's new chancellor, Friedrich Merz, told Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky that Berlin will help Kiev produce long-range missiles to defend itself from Russian attack. Now, the Kremlin has warned that any decision to end range restrictions on the missiles that Ukraine can use would be a dangerous change in the policy that would harm efforts to reach a political deal. In the face of Russia's recalcitrance, Trump has frequently softened his demands, shifting the emphasis from his original call for an immediate 30-day ceasefire, to which only Ukraine agreed, to more recently demanding a summit with Putin to get what he says would be a breakthrough. Putin and his foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, have upped their demands from earlier positions since the U.S. restored contacts with the Russians in February. These have included a demand that Ukraine cede parts of its own country not even occupied by Russia, and that the U.S. recognizes Crimea as a formal part of Russia. Now, Michael McFaul, a former U.S. ambassador to Moscow, calls this a poison pill introduced by Russia, creating conditions that Kiev could never agree to in order to shift blame onto the Ukraine in Trump's eyes. Now, the war has claimed tens of thousands of lives and left much of Ukraine's east and south in ruins. Moscow controls roughly 1/5 of the country's territory, including Crimea, which it annexed in 2014. Zelensky has accused Moscow of delaying the peace process and said that they were yet to deliver a promised memorandum of peace terms following talks in Istanbul. Peskov insisted the document was in its final stages. Wow, there you have it, you guys. Let me know your thoughts. Are we going to see a ceasefire agreement in the next 14 days? Do you think that this is going to happen? Let me know your thoughts. Or do you think we're going to be going to World War III? Where are we going from here? things seem to be escalating in what they're calling the war of words between the United States and Russia. And it appears that Russia is saying that they're willing to do some sort of ceasefire memorandum to try to come to some sort of an agreement. However, at this time, we have not seen anything materialize yet. And Donald Trump is saying you have 2 weeks to get this done. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Now, this comes as we heard them say that they criticized Donald Trump on his response to what is going on and said that he is potentially bringing us to World War III with his emotional outbursts. Take a look at the latest headlines. Now, as I mentioned, I reported this to you when it had come out. This came out yesterday, and it says former Russian president threatens Trump with World War III after Putin criticisms. Now, it says a former Russian president has threatened World War III after Donald Trump criticized Vladimir Putin for his actions in Ukraine. The U.S. branded the comments by often inflammatory Dmitry Medvedev's reckless as the war of words between the two global powers continues to ramp up. However, diplomatic efforts, they appear to be ongoing despite the public clashes, and in a rare move, U.S. embassy officials were seen attending a security meeting in Moscow on Wednesday. The latest tit-for-tat began at the weekend when Trump called the Russian leader crazy following an airstrike on Kiev. He doubled down on the criticism on Tuesday in a post on Truth Social. What Vladimir Putin doesn't realize is that if it weren't for me, lots of really bad things would have already happened to Russia, and I mean really bad. He's playing with fire. Medvedev, who served as Russian president from 2008 to 2012 and is now a top security official, flipped Trump's remarks, writing, "I only know of one really bad thing, World War III. I hope Trump understands this." Trump's special envoy to Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, then weighed into the row. Stoking fears of World War III is an unfortunate, reckless comment by Medvedev and unfitting of a world power, he wrote on X. President Trump is working to stop this war and end the loss of lives. We await receipt of RU memorandum, term sheet, that you promised a week ago. Ceasefire now. Now, the sighting of the two U.S. officials from the embassy in Moscow at an international security forum in the Russian capital is notable, as it marks the first time an American delegation has attended such an event since before Putin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Now, Counselor for Political and Economic Affairs Eric Jordan and Second Secretary Jeremy Ventuso were both seen at the international meeting of high representatives for security issues. The Russian leader opened up the event, saying that Moscow's approach to security, which includes its war in Ukraine, remains fundamental and unchanged. The move was likely a low-cost goodwill gesture, signaling the Trump administration's continued desire to normalize relations with Moscow. Now, says Sam Green, professor in Russian politics at King's College in London. Now, for Moscow, he added, the invasion is the latest attempt to signal supposed seriousness about talks with the U.S. without actually giving anything up. Now, just a day earlier, after Trump's initial comments about Putin becoming crazy, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov suggested the U.S. leader was a man who wants results, but who had got emotional. He added that Europe was trying to sabotage the efforts of Russia and the U.S. to broker peace, a reference to efforts to sanction Moscow for refusing to agree to a truce in Ukraine. President Trump is a man who wants results, Lavrov said at a press conference with his Turkish counterpart, Hakan Fidan. He sees some of the Europeans are working to sabotage his efforts on a peace settlement, pushing Ukraine to absolutely reckless actions. Of course, he gets emotional, and of course, as someone who does not like anything to stand in the way of his noble goals, he looks at it a certain way and shifts the rhetoric. The most important thing is not to focus on mere rhetoric, but rather to ensure that Europe stops sabotaging our peace plans, which are supported by both the U.S. and Turkey, and to which Russia is fully committed. Russian state media has subsequently played down Trump's latest comments, highlighting that the U.S. president is yet to take any action against Moscow despite his recent warnings. Now, Dmitry Durayev, A Russian political commentator from Kommersant described Trump's latest comments as a skirmish across the ocean. Now, from the beautiful phrases about wonderful negotiations, about the fact that a breakthrough on the path to peace is about to happen, Donald Trump has moved on. No to threats, or rather to reproaches. You can also call it an exchange of pleasantries, a skirmish across the ocean, he wrote. Nevertheless, nothing terrible has happened yet. So now the question is whether America will follow Europe in raising the stakes or, as before, limit itself to beautiful phrases and reproaches. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Man, basically just brushing off Donald Trump, saying that they just feel like these are beautiful phrases, not super concerned or worried about it. Man, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Jasmine Miller, thank you so much for the $10 super chat. I appreciate that a ton. Says thank you for keeping us up to date. I'd like to know what you and others plan to do with this information. I appreciate that super chat. And yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think that we're going to be entering into war? Do you think that Russia is going to come to a ceasefire, a deal in the next 2 weeks? Or do you think they're going to blow this off? Are we going to see things escalate with Russia, Ukraine, and now the United States, or are things going to simmer down? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, but regardless of what happens, I'll be sure to keep you up to date here on the channel so you know exactly what is going on, because it looks like things are escalating and significantly right now. They're saying since the war with Russia and Ukraine started, we have not seen the fighting intensify to the point that it is at right now. Things are increasing significantly, and Donald Trump is saying, you've got 2 weeks to work this out. We can't have this going on any longer. So we will see, and I will keep you up to date here on the channel. And in addition to that, as I mentioned, if you or somebody you love is currently caught up in debt, well, today we've got a special offer I'd like to share with you. I'm going to put it up on the screen. American Financing. You can give them a call at 866-890-7706. And it's totally free to call in, see if they're going to be able to help you out. I've got a QR code on the screen as well, and you can go to americanfinancing.net/Steve Ram. Totally free to give them a call. Only takes 10 minutes to fill out the form and see if they can help you out. And on average, they save somebody $800 per month when they're able to help them out. So I'm going to pin that in the comments down below. It's also in the description, and you saw it on the screen. And I hope that that is a blessing to you. But you guys, like I said, I'll keep you up to date on whatever unfolds. That is the latest. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll be sure to keep you up to date, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care, you guys. God bless. This is Steve.